The monitor's steady beep was the only sound in the empty hospital corridor until the gasping began. A ragged cough echoed from the entrance, where a shivering figure collapsed onto the icy tiles. Nurse Sarah Mitchell didn't hesitate. She dropped her coffee and ran, her sneakers squeaking against the sterile floor. But in that split-second decision to help a stranger, she had no idea it would cost her everything. Man's face was shadowed beneath a frayed hood, his skin tinged blue from the winter air. Sarah recognized the signs instantly: pneumonia, maybe hypothermia. She grabbed a blanket from the supply cart, ignoring the protocol that demanded a patient's insurance check first. "Hey, stay with me," she whispered, pressing her fingers to his wrist. His pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. Behind her, the elevator dinged. Footsteps approached, sharp, impatient. She knew that walk. Dr. Richard Langley. St. Mary's Hospital wasn't the kind of place that rewarded kindness. Not since the new board took over, slashing budgets and posting signs that read, "Unauthorized treatments will be reported." Sarah had seen the memos, heard the whispers about prioritizing revenue streams. But none of that mattered when a life was at stake. She tucked the blanket around the man's shoulders, her voice steady. "What's your name?" He coughed again, his chapped lips parting. "D. Danny," he rasped. A faded Marine Corps tattoo peeked from his sleeve. Footsteps stopped. "Mitchell." Dr. Langley's voice was a scalpel, cold, precise. "That bay is for admitted patients only." Sarah didn't turn around. "He needs oxygen, maybe IV antibiotics." A pause, then Langley's hand clamped her shoulder, spinning her to face him. His breath smelled of mint and disdain. "Did he check in? Does he have a file?" The unspoken words hung between them. "Is he worth it?" Sarah's grip tightened on the blanket. "He's a veteran," she said quietly. Langley's laugh was a short, humorless burst. "Tell that to the board when they dock your pay." He yanked the blanket away, tossing it onto the cart. Danny shuddered, his eyes fluttering shut. Sarah reached for him, but Langley blocked her path. "Clock out, Mitchell. Security will handle this." The order slithered down her spine. She'd heard that tone before. It wasn't a warning. It was an ending. Outside, the wind howled as Sarah pushed through the hospital doors. Snow stung her cheeks, or maybe it was tears. Somewhere behind her, Danny was being dragged into the cold. Somewhere above, in a corner office, a phone began to ring, but Sarah couldn't know yet that call would change everything. By dawn, the entire hospital would learn the truth. Danny Carter wasn't just another homeless man, and firing Sarah Mitchell would become the biggest mistake St. Mary's had ever made. Fluorescent lights hummed like angry wasps as Sarah stormed back into the ER, her fists clenched at her sides. Rules or no rules, she wouldn't let Danny freeze to death in some alley, not after spotting that faded Semper Fi tattoo on his wrist. The security guard at the door barely glanced up from his phone as she slipped past, her scrubs blending into the chaos of the midnight shift. Danny was right where she'd left him, slumped against the ambulance bay doors, his breath coming in shallow wheezes. This time she didn't hesitate. Grabbing a wheelchair from the empty triage zone, she crouched beside him. "We're doing this my way now," she muttered, looping his limp arm around her shoulders. His skin burned through her scrubs, fever spiking. Supply closet door creaked as she shouldered it open, revealing the one place Langley's cameras couldn't see. The old trauma room, decommissioned last month due to budget cuts. Danny's head lolled as she heaved him onto the cracked vinyl gurney. Peeling back his layers, she uncovered the real damage. A festering wound on his ribs, the edges tinged green. Army field medicine kicked in. Alcohol wipes, gauze, the last vial of antibiotics she'd pocketed during last week's inventory. Her hands worked on autopilot while her mind replayed Langley's sneer. "Let him die in the street, then," a voice hissed in her head. The syringe trembled in her grip. Danny's eyes flew open as the needle pricked his arm. "Easy, soldier," she whispered, pressing a palm to his damp forehead. For a heartbeat, his gaze sharpened, clear and startlingly young beneath the grime. "You're different," he croaked. The words hung between them, fragile as the ice outside. Then his eyelids fluttered shut again. Sarah exhaled, tucking her own lunch, a thermos of chicken soup next to the gurney. The clock read 2:17 a.m., 3 hours till shift change, 3 hours to save him before. Door crashed open. Langley's silhouette filled the doorway, backlit by the hallway's glare. His polished loafers squeaked on the linoleum as he stepped inside, nostrils flaring at the scent of antiseptic and desperation. "I gave you an order, Mitchell." His voice was dangerously quiet. Sarah didn't move, her body shielding Danny's still form. "Hypothermia protocol states..." "Protocol?" Langley snatched the empty antibiotic vial from the counter, holding it up like evidence. "This is theft. This is career suicide." The vial shattered against the wall. Down the hall, a phone rang. Langley's pager buzzed, code blue, 4th floor. For a second, his mask slipped, panic flickered behind his glasses. Sarah seized it. "Go," she challenged. "Let the board ask why their golden boy let a veteran die over $8 of penicillin." The standoff stretched brittle. Then Langley turned on his heel. "Clean this up. You're done at St. Mary's." The door slammed. Dawn bled through the blinds as Sarah pressed Danny's discharge papers into the hands of a wide-eyed intern. "Take him to Harbor House Shelter," she ordered, stuffing her last $20 into the boy's coat. "Say he's your uncle." The wheels of the taxi hadn't even vanished around the corner when the text came through. "Report to HR immediately." Her badge weighed like a stone in her pocket. Across town, in a shelter cot, Danny coughed, alive. For now. Neither of them knew the storm that single act of defiance had set loose. By noon, Langley's smirk would vanish forever. By dusk, every news van in the city would cluster outside St. Mary's doors. But in this frozen moment, there was only Sarah, staring at the text that ended her career and the soup thermos left behind, still warm on the gurney. The cardboard box felt heavier than it should have as Sarah shoved her framed nursing license inside. 10 years of dedication reduced to a few staplers and a wilted plant. Around her, the break room buzzed with hushed voices, nurses avoiding eye contact, interns pretending not to stare. The click of her locker door echoed too loud in the sudden silence. Then, from the hallway, a familiar wheeze. Danny stood there, swaying slightly in donated clothes 2 sizes too big, his face still pale but clean. "They told me you got fired," he rasped. A janitor dropped a mop bucket. The clang made them both flinch. Sarah forced a smile. "Worth it." The lie tasted bitter. She hadn't thought past saving him, hadn't considered the mortgage, the student loans. Danny's cracked fingers tightened around something in his pocket. "I tried to tell him." TV blared to life in the waiting area. Controversy erupts at St. Mary's Hospital after a decorated combat veteran was denied treatment. Sarah's face flashed on screen beside a photo of Danny in uniform. The camera panned to protesters already gathering at the entrance, their signs screaming shame. Danny stiffened. "That's not. I didn't." His distress triggered a coughing fit. Sarah reached for him instinctively, but a security guard materialized between them. "Ma'am, you need to leave." Rain sheeted down as Sarah emerged into the chaos. Reporters swarmed, microphones jabbing like weapons. "Nurse Mitchell, did the hospital really?" A teenager thrust a phone in her face, live-stream comments scrolling too fast to read. Hero disgusting and why Grandpa died there. Behind her, the automatic doors hissed shut one final time. Danny watched from an upstairs window as Sarah's figure disappeared into the storm. His reflection superimposed over the protest, his own younger face staring back from the news footage. The medal they kept showing, he'd thrown it in a river years ago. Now it was everywhere, polished and perfect, proof of what he'd failed to be. The boardroom doors down the hall burst open. "Liability nightmare," someone shouted. Danny's fingers found the dog tags in his pocket, the real ones, with the scratches and blood no camera would ever see. Across town, Sarah's phone lit up with a number she didn't recognize. The caller ID read restricted. She almost didn't answer. In the hospital basement, Dr. Langley shredded paperwork with methodical precision. One page slipped free, a Medicaid billing form with his signature and a very wrong date. The shredder jammed. And in a quiet house 30 miles away, an old man paused his morning coffee as the news segment played. His grip tightened on the mug. That face, that name. After 15 years, he'd know his missing corporal anywhere. The phone was already in his hand. The storm, it seemed, was just beginning. The hospital boardroom smelled of expensive coffee and panic. Margaret Holloway, CEO of St. Mary's, drummed her manicured nails against the polished table as her lawyers whispered about damage control. On the conference screen, news footage looped. Protesters, Sarah Mitchell's tearful interview, that damned Marine Corps photo of Danny Carter looking like some kind of war hero. The PR director was mid-sentence when the phone rang. Margaret snatched the receiver. "I said no interruptions." But the voice on the other end froze her blood, deep, measured, the kind of calm that comes from giving orders in war zones. "You have until noon to reinstate Nurse Mitchell." A file folder slapped onto the table in front of her, delivered by a trembling intern. Inside, Danny's real military records, not the sanitized version the news was running, the ugly truth, the classified missions. The Purple Heart awarded after he dragged 6 men through enemy fire. Margaret's mouth went dry. "Who is this?" Voice continued like she hadn't spoken. "At 12:01 p.m., the IRS gets your 2022 Medicaid billing records, the ones where you charged for empty beds." Her pen snapped. The lawyers were staring now. That's absurd," she hissed, but the spreadsheet staring back at her, the one her accountant had lost last quarter, said otherwise. The voice dropped lower. "Your chief of medicine signed off on those. Ask him about room 412 on March 14th. Down in the ER, Dr. Langley was elbow-deep in a car crash victim when his pager exploded with messages. Emergency board meeting. The trauma lights flickered as he washed up. Odd, he could have sworn he heard helicopter blades. Back in the boardroom, Margaret's assistant burst in. "Ma'am, there's..." The windows rattled. Outside, 2 Black Hawks circled the helipad, not hospital transports, military. The phone voice turned glacial. "You're treating a Silver Star recipient like garbage while committing fraud. How do you think that plays on Capitol Hill?" A click, then dial tone. Margaret's reflection in the glass showed cracks in her armor, smudged mascara, a wrinkle in her designer suit. The board members' phones started buzzing simultaneously. Twitter alerts, a viral thread, at St. Mary's scandal with photos of Danny's actual discharge papers, medical neglect stamped in red. The PR director choked on his coffee. "That's not possible. Those records are sealed under." The door flew open. Langley stood there, pale as his coat. "We need to talk about 412. Margaret's perfect nails dug into the table. Outside, the protest had tripled in size. News choppers joined the military ones. And in the center of it all, leaning on a cane someone had given him, stood Danny Carter, not broken, not begging, just waiting. Sarah saw it all from her kitchen table, her phone blowing up with texts from former colleagues. The strangest one came from an unknown number. Check your email. Attached was a job offer, head of community care with a salary bump. The sender's signature block read General M. Reynolds, USMC, Ret. At precisely 11:58 a.m., the hospital's Twitter account posted a single sentence. St. Mary's is pleased to announce Nurse Sarah Mitchell's reinstatement with full honors. The comments exploded. Langley never made it to noon. They found him in his office, shredder smoking, surrounded by files that would land him in federal prison. The last thing he destroyed was a sticky note with a phone number and the words Room 412 scribbled beneath. As the clock struck 12, Danny finally walked away from the cameras. His limp was worse in the cold. He didn't see the black sedan idling at the curb or the old man inside watching him with wet eyes. Not yet. Some reunions needed more than a viral moment. They needed truth, and truth, like karma, was just getting started. The hospital's fax machine whirred to life, spitting out an IRS audit notice. Upstairs, Margaret's perfect hair collapsed along with her empire, and across town, Sarah's doorbell rang. Danny stood on her porch holding two things, her lost thermos and an envelope marked confidential. "Turns out," he said quietly, "we both got some justice today." Behind him, the news vans were already turning onto her street. The real story, the one about missing soldiers and hospital cover-ups, was just beginning. Somewhere, a general hung up his phone and allowed himself one small smile. 15 years was a long time to wait, but Semper Fi meant always. Scent of fresh paint still hung in the air as Sarah ran her fingers over the new nameplate on her office door. Director of Community Care, Sarah Mitchell. The same janitor who'd watched her pack her belongings weeks ago now buffed the brass with a grin. Down the hall, construction crews converted the abandoned pediatrics wing into something the board had once called a ridiculous expense, a 24/7 homeless clinic. The hammering blended with the buzz of her phone. Another interview request. Another donation offer. She still wasn't used to being the one reporters called hero instead of disgraced. Danny's voice startled her from the doorway. "They gave you windows." He leaned heavier on his cane than last week, but color had returned to his face. The VA psychiatrist's note in his file, PTSD symptoms improving, flashed through her mind. He set down a cardboard box labeled supplies with a thump. Inside weren't just bandages and syringes, but something more precious: peanut butter packets, socks, dog-eared paperbacks. "Figured your fancy new patients might need more than stitches," he muttered. The care package from Harbor House Shelter, where he now volunteered, smelled like hope and second chances. Commotion erupted downstairs. Margaret Holloway, former CEO, was being escorted out by federal agents, her designer heels clicking furiously against the linoleum. She caught Sarah's eye through the atrium glass and froze. For a heartbeat, the woman who'd fired her over $8 of penicillin looked like she might speak. Then the agent nudged her forward, toward the waiting news cameras and their shouted questions about Medicaid fraud. Danny's quiet chuckle was reward enough. Dr. Langley's replacement arrived at noon, a silver-haired woman who'd trained at military hospitals. Her first act, approving Sarah's proposal for a veterans health program, with Danny as its first patient advocate. The pen trembled in his hand as he signed the contract. "Never thought I'd have a desk job," he joked, but the way his thumb brushed his dog tags told the real story. This wasn't just employment, it was belonging. At evening, Sarah found Danny in the newly christened clinic kitchen, microwaving two terrible hospital coffees exactly the way she liked them. Outside, golden hour light streamed through windows that no longer had bars. "To fresh starts," he offered, clinking their styrofoam cups. The toast caught in her throat. 3 weeks ago, she'd been scrubbing vomit from ER floors. Now her ID badge opened doors marked authorized personnel only. Peace shattered when her pager buzzed, Trauma 1 stat. They ran together, Danny keeping pace despite his leg. The gurney held a teenager in a gas station uniform, his arm bleeding through a makeshift tourniquet. "Couldn't afford the ER," the boy gasped. Sarah didn't glance at the admissions desk. She just snapped gloves on and reached for sutures. Over her shoulder, Danny was already rifling through their donated supplies. "Kid needs antibiotics," he barked at a gaping intern. "The good ones." Later, as the boy slept under a real blanket for the first time in months, Sarah noticed Danny studying the VA paperwork that helped him complete. His finger traced the honorable discharge stamp, the one that came with back pay and therapy coverage. "They found my records," he said softly. Somewhere in Washington, a certain retired general had made sure of that. The weight that lifted from his shoulders was almost visible. Instruction resumed at dawn. Sarah watched workers peel St. Mary's off the building's facade, revealing the original name underneath, Mercy General. A coincidence, the board claimed. Nobody believed them. Down in the lobby, a new plaque glittered. "In gratitude to those who remind us what medicine means." The dedication ceremony would be tomorrow. The local news was calling it a feel-good story. But the real story unfolded in room 412, now a therapy office, where Danny sat across from his first client, a homeless Iraq vet. No cameras, no headlines, just one broken soldier telling another, "It gets better." Outside, Sarah adjusted the thermostat so the waiting room would be warm enough for coats that smelled of bus stations and park benches. Her phone buzzed, another email from General Reynolds. The Marines could use someone like you at our Bethesda clinic. She closed it without replying. This was her place now, this messy, imperfect healing place. As night fell, Danny appeared at her office door, 2 dinner trays in hand. The cafeteria meatloaf was still inedible. They ate it anyway, laughing like people who'd survived something together, because they had. Because tomorrow another Danny would stagger through their doors. Another Sarah would need courage. But tonight the coffee was hot, the chairs were comfortable, and the world, for one fragile moment, felt right. Somewhere beyond the parking lot, a black sedan idled. Its occupant watched the lighted windows a while longer before telling the driver to head home. There would be time enough tomorrow to finally step out of the shadows, to say the words he'd waited 15 years to speak, "Welcome back, Corporal." But redemption, like medicine, worked best in small doses. The sedan pulled away quietly, leaving only tire marks on the rain-damp asphalt. Inside, unaware, Danny Carter stirred his coffee and smiled. The camera lingers on Sarah's office window, the one where she once watched snow bury her career. Now golden morning light spills across a framed photo on her desk. Danny shaking hands with his first therapy client, both men standing tall despite the wounds no one could see. The narrator's voice is warm, but weighted with truth. They say hospitals run on medicine, but that's only half the story. What really heals? A nurse's stubborn hands, a veteran's quiet courage, the moment someone chooses kindness over rules. The scene dissolves to St. Mary's, No Mercy General's new free clinic where a line already winds around the block. An elderly woman receives an insulin vial without filling out a single form. A child leaves clutching both a lollipop and an inhaler. Sarah Mitchell lost her job for giving a homeless man soup. 12 hours later, an entire system crumbled. Coincidence? Maybe. The camera finds Danny at his desk, sliding a peanut butter packet to a shivering teen. His dog tags catch the light, no longer hidden, no longer shameful. Or maybe the world keeps a secret ledger. Every act of mercy, every moment of humanity, they add up. And sometimes. A newspaper headline flashes, CEO, SCNT, and CED 2 5 years for fraud, then melts into a different image. Dr. Langley, now working at a rural clinic, handing a Band-Aid to a farmer's kid. Even villains get second chances. Music swells as Sarah walks the halls she was once banished from, her stethoscope now a symbol of redemption. You want to change the world? Start small. Start now. That stranger you helped today might be your salvation tomorrow. The screen splits. Danny's VA benefits approval letter arriving in the mail. Sarah's mother hanging her Employee of the Year plaque. General Reynolds finally stepping out of his car at the clinic doors, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Kindness is never wasted. It just takes time for the universe to deliver the receipt. Fade to black. Then white text. What good deed will you do today? The final shot is of heroes or headlines. It's a close-up of that dented soup thermos, now perched on Danny's desk, refilled daily as sunlight dances across its scratched surface. Proof that ordinary things become extraordinary when wielded with love. This is the end of this story, but the real ending. That's still being written, one patient, one act of courage at a time.